Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Well, a huge news week with so many global headlines and crypto news to get through. A lot of that is intertwined these days, so I would encourage you to watch the full episode. We do welcome a few hundred new subscribers this week, and we actually had one of our best ever interviews, and this one's flown under the radar a little bit. So be sure to check out this interview we did with Mark Yusko talking about getting institutional funds into Bitcoin. And I think this one is an absolute cracker. So check it out on podcast or YouTube over the festive period when you do get a chance. Big thank you to all our premium members that have been supporting us. None of this is possible without you guys. We've got a long list of extra value that you guys get, and we are launching that member portal in a couple of weeks for those of you that don't love Facebook. I do want to start off with this news item about TV ad sales tumbling to 10-year lows because more people are cutting the cord and not watching TV, choosing to get their content from creators like myself or these other, I guess, non-mainstream platforms. So that is really awesome to see, and thank you all for following and choosing Nuggets News. So final reminder, last question of the Crypto Christmas, free to enter. This Christmas, ask your friends and family these questions about Bitcoin and about global debt, and you get a prize if you do give us the best answer, but hopefully you get your friends and family aware of what's going on and maybe interested in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So into the local news, where it's set to be one of the hottest weeks ever in Australia this week. A lot of places touching 40 consistently, so stay safe out there. This is going to bring about bushfires, obviously, and we've already had a pretty rough time of it, and we're only just entering summer, so just be aware that that is on the way. The next thing I want to mention was this report about climate change, and this climate index actually has Australia list last in terms of their climate policy. So what do you guys think about this? I know a lot of people are upset. We saw tens of thousands of protesters in Sydney this week. Civil unrest is something that I've been predicting. I thought it was maybe going to come for the banks and the Royal Commission, but it looks like people just don't feel like politicians are listening to them. And with so much abundant sunshine, I definitely would love to see us make a more aggressive move down that path of renewables. So the Holden Commodore, iconic Australian car, is being axed after 40 years on the road. Now, we're just not competitive with our manufacturing and those costs, so unfortunately, these headlines continue to roll in. Harris Scarf, another retail store, into receivership. That retail sector has just been smashed in Australia as more people shop online, and these older business models just aren't keeping up to date with the younger consumer, as well as a lot of Aussies putting away their wallets at the moment as times are getting tougher. The biggest shopping day of the year was this Saturday, and Myer did have their registers down for a number of hours, unfortunately leaving Christmas shoppers stranded. So every week this year it seems like there's been ATMs down or bank outages, payment system outages. So this is one of the reasons why I'm so opposed to the cash ban, as well as just having cryptocurrency and blockchain in the future. These things that don't have any downtime continue to solve problems. Now, the IMF urged Australia this week to put stimulus before the budget surplus. So they're coming out and saying to the government, you need to be spending more, or we need to get the RBA to start printing more money as well. So this is where they've been butting heads, and next year it's going to be that standoff about who backs down first. The RBA going to drop rates and print money, or is the government going to start to really ramp up spending to try and stimulate the economy? Now, it's not all doom and gloom. Rare earth metals could be the next boom, and Australia has an abundance of those. We've already got a lot of good mines in that space. I mentioned one a little while back that has done really well because China and all these manufacturing nations that all the technology comes out of, they need these rare earth metals, and more devices means more and more need for these elements as well. Now, the Australian dollar actually jumped off the back of the US-China trade deal, which we'll get to in just a second. But just remember that China's our largest trading partner. All those resources, that relationship, that's actually a good thing. If the Aussie dollar continues to strengthen, on the chart, we're actually at a really critical turning point, which I might mention later. But that's a worse nightmare for the RBA. They don't want the Aussie dollar getting stronger and stronger at a time when they're trying to keep it down to stimulate and help our exports, get that price of iron ore up. Now, the worst performing super funds have been exposed in a recent report by APRA. So make sure you're aware of what you're invested in. So many people don't even know if they've got a super fund, who it's with, and then what they're invested in. So not everyone can do their self-managed super. Obviously, we recommend New Brighton Capital, and there's the free consultation if you're not sure whether or not this is for you. But either way, you should have an interest about what you're investing in. Am I exposed to Australian property, overseas stocks? Am I sitting in cash? If they start to print money, maybe stocks are going to keep going up into a bigger bubble. I'm not sure. But either way, over this period, if you have a break, make sure you find out what you're invested in. A big wake-up call to our politicians. 75% of voters are saying that politicians can't be trusted. Some people saying that figure should be a lot higher. Either way, the trust in government and our leaders, it's at record lows. Commissioner Hayne has been saying this. I've repeatedly said it on the channel as well. And it's things like this that happen during the week which really lose people's trust. So this Senate cash ban, it got pushed out last minute, 5:30 p.m, announced it was going to be the next day. So no one from the public has time to find out or attend. Now, I watched this in full online, and the senators really pushed back. They weren't buying what these regulators and different parties that presented were putting down. They're saying that doesn't make sense. What about all the banks, the casinos, the regulators, all these other things that are happening and that's falling through the cracks, and yet you want to impose this that's going to affect, the everyday Australian. So that was a good start. A lot of pushback there. Now, Australia's democracy has officially been downgraded from open to narrowed. So the lucky country, and if you feel like those civil liberties have been eroded, a recent report that's come out has actually made that official, where Australians are losing their civil liberties and freedoms. So Greeks are facing heavy fines if they don't spend 30% of their income electronically. So just have a look at what is happening globally now. They're trying to phase out cash, and now they're telling you what you can and can't do with your money. They want to monitor if you're buying crypto or gold or anything outside the system. And now they're telling you that you have to spend your income. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is why people are going to flock to these alternate assets, because they're sick of being told what to do. They're being rounded up and parked in banks before governments want to print money and debase that currency. So this is why it's not fair to use the system when you don't want to be a victim of that debasement and loss of your purchasing power. So really interesting to see if this is going to spread to more countries as well. Now, the UK general elections were all over the news this week, and Augur, which is one of the decentralized prediction markets on Ethereum, saw hundreds of thousands of dollars of bets roll in, and the odds were actually pretty different to a lot of the mainstream sites. So there was some big payouts there when Boris did win and get elected. So look, he's promising Brexit. That's been promised by everyone for 4 years now. So let's see if he can finally get that over the line. The biggest headache I see for the ECB this year is the friction between the countries, but also now crypto. This press conference, Christine Lagarde's first as the head of the ECB, she got asked some pretty direct questions about Bitcoin, crypto, stablecoins, and she said they need to get in front of the curve. It's definitely taking people's interest. And as I just mentioned, if they're going to try and do these things with banks, people are going to become aware of their alternate options, and they're going to go there. They're not going to be treated badly if there's a better option out there. So really interesting for me to see where this all goes. Now, China's moment of reckoning has arrived. I've been mentioning this for a couple of weeks, and sure enough, we had the largest bond default in 2 decades. These large companies taking on too much debt, economy slowing down, and unfortunately, you can't pay all your investors and your bondholders. But the biggest piece of news this week was that US-China trade deal. Clashing of egos. Everyone wants to be the number one superpower globally. And I think that's why they've agreed to this deal where there's no public details going to be released. And not one or the other has to fly to a country to sign. And that just, to me, is neither side wanting to back down publicly, particularly to their own countrymen as well. They want to appear like they were the strong one that led the agreement. So either way, maybe this is just more smoke and mirrors, but some of those tariffs are going to no longer be imposed on December 15th. We did see a big uptick in jobless claims in the US, so one of the biggest in 2 years. We'll wait to see if this is just a one-off like we saw a couple of years ago, or if this is a start of a trend, like we've seen in some other countries with unemployment starting to tick higher. Now, one of the things I did want to mention again was magic mushrooms one step closer to becoming legal depression treatment. But we've also seen studies looking at Alzheimer's, anorexia, obsessive compulsive disorder, and migraines. So just like we had cannabis become a big medical industry and money go into it, people are now seeing this as an opportunity for research. And I'm a big believer that we don't know half of how the brain works. And so these substances are going to reveal a lot in the coming years. Another big spend by Donald Trump was his Space Force. So some of you will be aware that there's a theory going around that you always need an enemy, and the final enemy they want to make is from space. So there's a video floating around. I recommend you watch it, talking about this big bill and why they want to spend all this money again to spark the economy, pretend there's a war and there's a threat. So let me know what you guys think of Donald Trump's Space Force and if we need to be militarizing outer space. Now, gold and silver have had a good week after the correction that's lasted a few months now. And this was off the back of Christine Lagarde's comments around inflation is coming. Now, we've also seen the Fed say they'd let inflation run a little hotter. So all of a sudden, they can't get any inflation with all the stimulus stuff done. And they're saying, well, we're going to let it run hot. We actually want inflation. So careful what you wish for is my message. And if it comes, then they've got to raise interest rates to stop inflation. That obviously crushes everyone and all the businesses that have a lot of debt. But either way, this is just another ingredient that's great for a gold and silver rally that's approaching. Goldman Sachs also telling their clients this week that the case for gold is as strong as ever. So now it's the big banks telling their wealthy clients. We've already seen central banks accumulating gold, and lots of you guys know my investment case for gold. So earlier this week, we saw Credit Suisse come out with this call about Fed's going to launch QE4 before the end of the year. And I recommend you check out a podcast with Zoltan Pozar. He was a guest on the Odd Lots podcast talking about the huge hole in the repo market and how they're going to have to print hundreds of billions of dollars because there's just not enough liquidity there, and otherwise the system would crash. And sure enough, a few days later, the Fed have come out and said, 500 billion, maybe even more, to avoid this liquidity crunch at the end of the year. Now, remember those bailout packages in the GFC were around the $800 billion mark. So this is almost as big as the bailouts in the GFC. But again, they're not calling it QE. And people are saying that don't panic. This is all temporary. It's all under control. I really disagree. Something big is going on. If you look at the Fed's balance sheet, this is going to be at new record highs by January. And you just can't say that is normal. So they continue to increase, and maybe this is going to increase even more before the end of the month. The final thing I want to mention was Aramco. So I mentioned the IPO last week, and the second day of trading, it actually hit a $2 trillion valuation. And just like a lot of ICOs or IPOs, you can see that there's a very little free float of shares. Most of those shares are tied up at the moment. That's where you can get these big spikes. And I believe it creates opportunities. So one of the reasons I like eToro is because this otherwise would be very hard to get access to in Australia. So I'm actually thinking of possibly shorting it this week if we get more of a bubble and more of an overvaluation. I love the fact that we can get access to these type of stocks. Now, for those of you that are interested in gold and silver, we've got 2 premium reports out for our members, and we also released our second fundamental analysis report this week. 5 of the best projects, a couple of those are in the DeFi space, and I believe that is where a lot of money is going to flow next year. This week, we saw the Block put out a piece about their Open Finance Index, and this is where the premium research and the smart money is starting to look for opportunities. With negative interest rates and whatnot, the stage is set for a massive year in 2020 for decentralized finance, that DeFi space, and earning yield. Now, the next thing I want to mention about crypto this week is the toxicity we've seen on crypto Twitter and a lot of other places as well. But drama is a drug, so don't get addicted. And the opiates, the dopamine in the brain, this is actually addictive, and people, they really, really thrive off drama if they don't have other human social connections, if they're a troll in their mum's basement and whatnot, guys. So just don't feed them. A lot of people I've even had tell me that they were going through a hard time when they were, trolling other people online and whatnot. So just something to keep in mind about that when you see it online, because at the moment there's so much toxicity, and I think it's because a lot of people are just bored with the markets. And I don't think crypto is going to head in the right direction until we phase this out and get rid of the toxicity and tribalism. Now, we've seen a lot of banks starting to get into the crypto custody space. ING are the latest one here. We've seen another German bank saying that they want to get into this space. So not only do the ECB have this headache of people going to crypto, but now they've got all their banks that are structurally weak wanting and being more interested in getting into this crypto space than maybe fixing the issues and all their derivatives on their books. So stablecoins continually in the news. BitPay have added 3 stablecoins for payments now because people don't want to spend their Bitcoin or their Ether, their crypto. They want to hodl that because they believe it's better money that's going to rise in value in future. So stablecoins have fixed a big gap, I believe, in the market, and it is really stiff competition for governments around the world. Particularly now, we've seen something like this happen where BlockFi have got their banking license and they can now offer interest-bearing accounts. This is absolutely nuts. This is DeFi really taking on the mainstream banks in the US, in these established countries. So super interesting. I think the yields are going to go down a little bit as it becomes more popular, but it's always going to be better than what the bank can offer. We've seen Santander pay dividends and complete their bond sale on Ethereum. So the public chain being used by these huge companies. I absolutely love it and love it when this stuff is happening. Sweden joined China and all these other central banks talking about launching an electronic or digital version of their own cryptocurrency. Africa have got their first stablecoin now built on Binance Chain. But the theme of 2020, I might do a summary video and a look ahead, but the theme of 2020 really has been stablecoins taking Bitcoin into that mainstream narrative. Now, Venezuela are actually going to be dropping their native currency this week. Airdropping. So petros are obviously that worthless that they're giving them away for free. And this is why you want to avoid these government currencies, because they can decide to print more or airdrop it, do whatever, and it's not backed by anything. It's not decentralized. Now, Tether is obviously the most controversial stablecoin, and this week we saw the New York Attorney General expand their accusations against Bitfinex. So I'm a believer that maybe it's not as bad as everyone thinks it is, but either way, this is all going to come out in court as these two continue to throw accusations and battle each other. Some positive news now where we had influencer Bill Pultz with over 1.5 million followers. He's such a philanthropist. He gives away a lot of money to those that need it most. And he's come out and said that he's buying the dip. He bought 11 Bitcoins this week. I think it's great. We saw during the last bear market, we saw a lot of big famous people come out and saying they were buying Bitcoin. So this gets people thinking, never a bad thing when someone with over 1 million followers is buying the dip. Unfortunately, VeChain did have some of their wallets hacked this week to the tune of $6.5 million. Because of the nature of the chain, they can tag those coins, so hopefully they don't get sent to an exchange and dumped. But never nice when we see these vulnerabilities in projects that are established and have been around for years and how they couldn't have picked them up. Over to Japan now, where Power Ledger have extended their trials with KEPCO. This time they're looking into the renewable energy credits. So if you watch that interview we did with Anya, they're talking about carbon credits. This is another big use case for their technology. And I'd love to see more trials going in Australia, but I'm sure they're going to continue to expand globally. Nike also using the Ethereum public chain for sneakers this week. We recently saw Cardano go down that route as well. TikTok are getting into the blockchain space. Reports that Chinese state media are trying to do something there. So if you don't know what TikTok is, I recommend you get on and have a bit of a play around. But this is massive with the younger generation. And if they have some sort of stable coin or gaming or collectibles on TikTok, that's just introducing another generation of people to crypto. Jack Dorsey has said that he wants to fund a decentralized social media standard. So he's been a big adopter and embracer of Bitcoin, Lightning, and saying that he knows that there's faults of social media. He's been in the news for all the wrong reasons around political Twitter, but wanting to build a framework for a better decentralized social media is a step in the right direction. DGX DAO is one of my favorite projects, and I believe they're a bit ahead of their time. They're doing the gold-backed token. They've been around for a few years, but they've recently included a mechanism for dissolution. So for those token holders that aren't happy, you can now choose to get your Ethereum back from their treasury fund. This is something they're proposing. Now, I'm not going to be doing that yet. I think the project is heading in the right direction still, but interesting that they have included that, and I guess a true show of decentralization. Second largest healthcare insurance provider in the US is now trialing blockchain. Last week I did that interview with Nexus Mutual around decentralized insurance, but interesting that this is Vitalik's second big wave after DeFi, of what he sees taking over on Ethereum and in crypto, the insurance space. Lisk having to lay off 21 staff. This is a good project in terms of the technology, but this mini crypto winter that we're having at the moment is starting to hurt projects as well. So they've cut their team back. Hopefully they can survive the tough times. But because of the stiff competition for platforms, unless you've got real businesses using your platform and your token, these sort of things are continuing to happen. Now, China are in the news again, having 2/3 of global hash rate. So what I'd encourage everyone to do is, if you're a member of a large mining pool, join one of the smaller or mid-tier pools and just start to decentralize that hash rate. We've seen plans for huge mining farms in the US and Russia and different parts of the world. So I don't think this is going to be the case for long. But at the moment, a lot of people are just joining these huge Chinese mining pools, and it shows up as China controlling the majority of hash rate, whereas it's not necessarily the case. Fidelity have announced that they'll be getting into Ethereum next year. The DeFi narrative, Ethereum in general and the mainstream adoption, this is where that money and the trusted institutions are beginning to look. I'm not a fan of Ethereum futures and the cash-settled nature of all those type of products. I've spoken about that before, but either way, Ethereum is getting into the mainstream. Now, Vitalik apparently told the Ethereum Foundation to sell near the top. So they sold 100 million ETH. Now, is that the right thing to do? We see huge amounts of tokens being sold all the time, but 100 million in the grand scheme of things, with a market cap of tens of billions of dollars of Ethereum, I don't think that that's that big a deal. And if they needed that funding, so be it. This is something that you have to be aware of. And we know the Ethereum Foundation and a lot of projects have a lot of ETH out there. So Matic, what a story that was this week. And I did tweet this as well as do a bit more of a detailed write-up for our members about how I thought a short opportunity was approaching. Sure enough, we had a bit of a news catalyst as well. I actually thought there was enough there just from the technicals to short it, and this was our best trade this year. And unfortunately for Matic holders, this did get absolutely crushed and it hasn't really rebounded. But this is the issue you face when you have these parabolic run-ups that just come from nowhere and didn't really have the fundamentals to back it up, although I do think Matic is a decent project longer term. So this week's TA is brought to you by eToro, guys. We've got the $100 free Bitcoin. Over 200 of you have taken up that offer, and I have sent out all the Bitcoin now. So hopefully check your wallets there. Once you deposit, make a few trades, eToro will also give you a 10% deposit credit. So as I said before, whether it's Aramco, gold and silver in my copy portfolio, that crypto fund, a lot of you want to copy. I believe that we're setting up for a really good entry point in gold and silver longer term as well. So I will be adding more exposure to that in my copy portfolio. But over to Bitcoin, where we remain in this narrow range, tightening up. I want to just remind you that this time of year is very thinly traded. Whales don't take Christmas off. So I think there is going to be a big move coming, maybe a nasty wick. If you have a look, I think we could actually get down into the 6s or even 5s, and that wouldn't be unusual. Either way, we were talking about heading lower on our cycle brackets to around the 20th of December if we did lose this level where we did start this time cycle. So look, once we lose this range, big move coming. Trade with caution out there. Enjoy some time away from the screen. I think we are setting up for a good 2020 with everything that's happening in that macro space. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed that video. Smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share these videos around, and I'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.